So, and I was bringing this up more, just trying to show the theological problems as I see them, because it's interesting that you say 132 itself makes it clear that monogamy is at least perfectly sufficient for exaltation, right? And yet all of the polygamists taught very different than that, right? We have Brigham Young on record, and the only men who will be the gods or even the sons of God are those who are polygamous, right, at least in their heart. And that's just one of many, many quotes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, it's interesting how to make the polygamous theological claim, we have to separate all the pieces apart and not really think of it. It doesn't work. The theological claim for polygamy doesn't work. And so that's why so it sounds like to me, you're saying from your perspective at this time, which I just want to make sure I'm clear, this did come from Joseph Smith. Yeah. Part of it from God and part of it was not valid revelation. And what the polygamists taught about polygamy was incorrect because it's not
right. So I would say it came. I would say my perspective is that 132 was dictated by Joseph Smith. That it is by the nature of how I view revelation and the revelatory process. It is a sort of human divine collaboration, where in parts of it we see more of the divine and in parts of it we see more of the human. And yes, I don't, there are complexities in exegesis, and I've done a lot in the past, a lot of exegesis with the NC 132. I do want to try to understand it like on its own terms, what it's saying. I've had different views at different times about what is it saying in this part or that part about whether polygamy is essential to exaltation. It definitely does not look like, and I'll say in the verses that we're talking about, like 14 to like 19 or 20, I think I see those verses don't mention polygamy at all. And yet they talk about couples being exalted. And so it certainly does not look there like polygamy is essential to exaltation. It does look like maybe in other parts of 132, like it might be saying that. And so then we get into questions of how do you correctly interpret those passages? And then we get into questions that, you and I are going to discuss further about, well, how much of this, was this all from Joseph Smith? Or was some of it added or some by others or something like that? But yeah.
That's a good point. That to me, that's more of the internal contradiction that shows that it's very problematic. Sure. So in any case, we can at least agree that at least many of the polygamous portions of 132 are not from God. You would agree to that?
So
like verse 63. Okay.
So again, I mean, the way that I'm framing this in how I think about it and therefore how I describe it is different from the form that your questions are taking.
Oh, okay.
So the way that I frame it is revelation inherently is a human divine collaboration or co-creation. Different aspects of revelation some of them reflect more of the divine, some reflect more of the human. So my point isn't to say, well, I reject this as divine. I mean, there are things that are very problematic in 132 that I think reflect Joseph Smith's level of frustration and so on in the situation. And so you could say, yeah, I guess that's how I would phrase it.
So if I were to say like verse 63, I can read it if you want. It's just my particular favorite verse of the whole thing, But if I were to read that verse, would you say it's like 90-10, Joseph God, 50-50? Where do you put that?
Given to him to bear the souls of men in the eternal world.
But if either of the 10 virgins after she is espoused shall be with another man, she has committed adultery and shall be destroyed. For they are given unto him to multiply and replenish the earth according to my commandment, and to fulfill the promise which was given by God before the foundation of the world, and for their exaltation in the eternal worlds, for that they bear the souls of men. For herein is the work of my Father continued, that he may be glorified. So I like that verse. We could just go with the first half of it. right? But if one of either of the 10 virgins that have been given to him in the previous verse, after she is espoused, shall be with another man, she has committed adultery and shall be destroyed. For they are given unto him to multiply and replenish the earth according to my commandment. So God, Joseph.
I would have points of disturbance and points of critique in this verse, as with others in 132. The way that I view it, I guess, isn't just that like a certain part is sort of like all Joseph or all God.
This is why I'm asking. Let me clarify.
Okay.
This matters, and this is where I get intense.
Okay.
Is this how God views women? That's the question. Is this how God views women? And we keep like pondering around it. And this is the verse that President Nelson referenced in his very first press conference as the new president of the church, right? It's like, what's going on? Because we've really ignored it before that. So that brought it back into the forefront. I just want to know, we as a people, is this who we say God is? That matters.
So you're saying, to help me understand, so you're saying like specifically in this verse that the idea that they're given to a man, so we can have a whole group of women, a number of women, and then
10 virgins given unto him by this law, he cannot commit adultery, for they belong to him, and they are given unto him. Therefore is he justified. But if one of the 10 virgins commit adultery, then she shall be destroyed. That's just one little encapsulation of this concept, of this perspective. It's not wording, it's not language. It is, what are women? What are men and what are women, and how do they interact with one another correctly according to God?
So are men and women equals who come together on a kind of equal footing, and there is a fit between them, there's a synergy between them, and this is how it is between like our heavenly parents, and this is what they want for us? Or is it like, well, you have a whole group of women who belong to a particular man, and they're given to him to like create a bunch of children, and sort of that's his glory or their glory, or
and more
I'm
than
sort of framing two alternative viewpoints. So my viewpoint would be the first, right?
So this is not from God. So you would reject at least these verses and say these are not of God. This does not represent the mind of God. Can we at least agree on that portion?
So I would say that to the extent that what I just characterized in the second statement, second alternative, is what this is saying, that I would see that as more coming from the human aspect here than the divine aspect. Yes, okay. I don't see that as a good description of how God views women.
Okay. I think it matters because this is currently in our canonized scriptures, right? As I talked about in that episode, we haven't lived it. I think 101 was canonized according to common consent and was in the Doctrine and Covenants until 1980. And so only for 10 years, 1880, thank you. Anyway, so this wasn't put in by common consent. It didn't follow the same procedure. It wasn't, that wasn't removed by common. So we haven't been following the procedures of the church. And I think the reason this matters is because so many people, both men and women, read this and think this is how God views men and women. So this is how I should view men and women. Right. Like men read that and adopt it.
Right.
Women read that and are devastated.
Yes.
And that's why it matters.
Yes.
Right. So when we kind of soft pedal around it, we don't do what we need to do. This is when I say I'm offended by this perspective of God. This is part of what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Because this is now canonized, not by common consent, not according to the law of the church, not done correctly. But since it's canonized, right, the fruits of it follow. And that's what we see in early Mormon polygamy. And that's what we see ongoing in fundamentalist communities. identities, and even just in attitudes, because people who even aren't living polygamy but are expecting to someday, both men and women, it does really bad things. It twists people's souls in negative ways.
Yes.